Hi, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to watch my policy advocacy presentation on social emotional development in infant and toddler mental health. Let's get into it. The contents of my presentation will start with what the policy is and why it is important, following with the history of the policy, my proposal, advocacy plan, my final product, and conclusion and a call to action. So, what is social emotional development in infant and toddler health? This policy focuses on the implementation of social emotional skills and mental health support in early childhood education settings. The reason this is so important is because I have noticed in my placement that many kids have trouble regulating their emotions, playing together nicely, and explaining how they feel, all of which can be taught by implementing social emotional learning at home and at their ECE settings. Without these skills, children will have a difficult time managing their behavior. Children who cannot regulate their emotions may act out, whether it be physically or verbally. These actions have consequences, often with educators practicing seclusion or some settings even suspending or expelling toddlers for this type of behavior. Now, let's dive into the history of this policy and see how it has changed over time, starting in the early days. Much of the basis of this policy can be attributed to Erik Erikson, as he emphasized social interaction with others as a part of his psychosocial development theory, viewing society and culture as things that shape us. Head Start. In 1965, Project Head Start began. Despite many obstacles along the way, the educators working at these programs were some of the first to incorporate social emotional learning and mental health into their programs. Here and now. Now, more than 10% of children in the US face mental health challenges, proving that there is a need for this policy to be implemented in all ECE settings. Unfortunately, as are most policies, the implementation of social emotional learning and the presence of mental health services is up to state and local governments. If these officials do not find it of importance, then it will most likely not be a required policy. However, the great thing about this policy is that it is something that can be implemented at home, which is why I chose to create a pamphlet to pass out to parents that describe the importance of this policy, which we will explore soon. My proposal. Social emotional development in infant and toddler mental health is incredibly important. Learning how to regulate emotions, interact with others, and to communicate is essential to becoming a thriving individual in our society. That is why I propose that this policy be implemented in all ECE settings. Incorporating social emotional learning can be very easy, especially if you don't overthink it. I spoke with a family friend who used to be a daycare teacher, and her number one recommendation is to use story time to your advantage. By picking books that teach the children about feelings, you can ask them leading questions to get them thinking about and understanding others' perspectives and feelings. The great thing is, this policy could be even used at home by guardians. My advocacy plan looks a little something like this. Number one, I began discussing social emotional development and mental health in early childhood with parents at pickup/drop off time to get an idea of what they already know. Secondly, I have began using an emotions board in my classroom to start talking about feelings or emotions each day with the kids. This helps lead into our story time, which often happens in the early morning and the midday. Making sure to choose books that focuses on developing these skills, while asking questions along the way to see what the children are comprehending and helping them by answering any questions they may have. And thirdly, I used what I learned about this policy in the parents' knowledge to create my final product, a pamphlet that will be passed out to parents at pickup time. Finally, we have my final product. This is the cover and back of the pamphlet I created. I included what social emotional development is and why it is so important, as well as my contact information in case parents or guardians have any questions. I'm happy to email them back with any answers if it's part of my knowledge. Now we are looking at the inside of the pamphlet, where I included social emotional milestones to look out for at different age ranges, what mental health in children looks like, / why it is important, And finally, I included activities that can be done at home to encourage the development of these skills. I also thought it was important to include that not every child will meet the same milestones that are listed at the same time, which does not mean that they can't or won't reach these milestones. Reminding parents that if they do have concerns about these, to ask their pediatrician. Now we have my conclusion and my call to action. Prioritizing social emotional development and mental health is in early childhood is crucial for children to learn the skills they need to self-regulate and begin socializing. My call to action is parents should understand the implications of this policy and why it is so important. Having this knowledge will allow them to begin teaching these skills at an early age. This policy should be required in all early childhood settings because, as we now know, having these skills will set them up for success later in life. Here I have listed the references I used for my policy and advocacy exploration project. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you learned something new or at least have a better understanding of why this policy is so important. Let's change children's lives one step at a time. Thank you.